Well, today's a pretty day, and I thought I've been wanting for a while to pull this old hay rake out of the meadow down there and see if I can get it working again. It's pretty rusted up and pretty old, but you never know. It looks like it'll still run again, maybe. I know a lot of the tons on these things are pretty rusted up, and I'm gonna have to deal with these breaking, but I looked them up, they're only about $1.49 a piece. So don't all of them break, it won't be bad. But I went ahead and I greased a bunch of stuff up on here, and a lot of these grease fittings I'm gonna have to replace, and there's grease everywhere. I just really wanted to get it loosened up and make sure it would spin and see how everything worked before I went to replacing about 30 grease fittings. So the tires on this thing are pretty much completely shot. So we're obviously gonna have to get some new tires. And the chain, I've got it good and oiled up, and went through last night and oiled, just put oil all over everything and greased everything that I could find that I could get grease into. So actually, when I went to pull this thing out, I completely broke the tongue off of it with the tractor. So I had to hook a chain around it to drag it up here. But this is the gearbox, and I pulled the drain plug out last night, and water just came pouring out. It's full of water. I guess it got in around the dipstick here. So went ahead and took the bolts out of the cover, pulled the cover off. The gears actually look really good. So I think I'm gonna get this thing cleaned out really well. It's got a bunch of gunk. I've got quite a bit of it out, but it's got a bunch of gunk in there and just trash. So I'm gonna take some carb and choke cleaner, and I'm just gonna try to spray and get all that junk out that I can before I put new oil in here. So I'm just gonna keep, so I don't know much about these things at all. My grandfather, my great-grandfather, this was his, and he used to rake and bale hay, but he got out of it right about the time, shoot, I was probably 6 years old. So I've never had anybody show me how these things work or really teach me much anything about these things, so I'm kind of winging it. But I found out once I took the cover off, this lever right here, and push it in or back, that engages it, and you pull the lever back and it disengages it. So it's pretty interesting just kind of tearing into this stuff and finding out how stuff works. Make old stuff work again. I like it. So I'm gonna just keep cleaning this up. I'm gonna get me a little wire brush and kind of clean all these gears and everything up before I put any new oil in there. All right, so I've got everything jacked up here, and I think it's pretty cool. These have almost like a catching inside the hub right here that you want to go in reverse or you're turning. So everything seems to be spinning pretty good. I'm gonna just keep working on cleaning this thing out a little bit. I don't think I'm gonna be able to get all of it. I think the best thing probably to do is get just everything I can, and then I'm gonna put oil in it and then run it for a little while, and then I'll change the oil a couple times. Probably the best way to clean it out. That or take a pressure washer to it, and I really don't want to get everything in there soaking wet, so I think I'll try that out. Did notice when I was turning the wheels here, this looks like a stop bolt is loose, and from best I can tell, this holds the yoke onto the shaft. So I'm gonna tighten this one up, and I'm gonna make sure the rest of these are tight as well. All right, so I think I got everything cleaned up pretty well. It's still a little bit of gunk down there in the bottom. I'm gonna try to spray that out a little more, but I'm gonna go ahead and I like to use the Permatex Aviation Form A gasket This stuff works really good. And I'm gonna clean up around the edges here where the cover seats, and then I'm gonna go ahead and brush some of this on, and I'm on the underside of the cover, and I'm gonna let it dry or kind of set for about 15 minutes. And I'm gonna bolt it all back together. All right, so here's the cover, and it's got all kinds of rust and stuff where this thing was full of water. The original gasket's not horrible. I don't even know where in the world you get one. So I'm gonna try to preserve that and just put that aviation gasket maker on there. So just gonna brush this, clean it up a little bit. Well, I got the cap cleaned up and went ahead and put the gasket maker on there, and I'm gonna let it dry for about 15 minutes. Here to dry, I decided to pull one of these hubs off, just kind of see how things work. So got the pin in here, cotter key, and I really need one of my little magnetic trays to put stuff. And then this comes off, and then the hub slides right off. And you can see it's got teeth in here, and that latch is what keeps all the teeth, or catches the teeth and lets it pretty much go forward in reverse and in gear. So this, I don't really see that it has any grease fittings, so I'm gonna take this out and I'm gonna grease everything up really well inside here. I'm gonna do the same on the other side, and then clean it up a little bit, some of this gunk off of here, and put it all back together. All right, so I just noticed that this nut that goes on the outside, or washer, or whatever you want to call it, has different slots. That's the slot it was in, which is pretty close, but you just kind of scrape the grease off. That's the lowest slot, and it's hard to get to focus, but this one shows a little bit better. There's a pretty good little gap right in there. So I'm gonna go ahead and move it up here to the next slot, where it pretty much is gonna keep tension on this a little bit better. And it's still got a little bit of play. Back in here it would have, shoot, 1/8 of an inch of play. So I'm gonna go ahead and put the pin in right here. So that'll give me, tighten it up a little bit, pretty much. All right, it's just good to go. It's a little bit smoother, a bit tighter too. Doesn't have any much play in it at all. So I'm missing the, whenever I took the bolts off, or the lug nuts, some of the studs came out, but they'll screw right back in. These things were rusted all to pieces. So what I did last night is I took some oil and coated them and let them set. So that helped out a lot. I don't know if I'd ever got them off without breaking them if I hadn't done that. I'm just gonna go ahead and pretty much kind of guesstimate how much fluid I need in here. And put an 80-90 gear oil in there. Which I don't know exactly what these are supposed to take, but I'm gonna just take a guess at that and hope that'll be the right sufficient weight. So there's not really a whole lot about these David Bradley hay rakes online that I've been able to find. So it's definitely lubricating the gears and everything. So probably needs a little bit more, but I think that'll be pretty close for me. All right, I got the cover back on. So now I'm just gonna bolt everything back together. There's just 4 bolts that go in it. Hold it down. And it's working. It's just spinning. I got one tooth down there raking. I gotta work on that. All right, so this tire was obviously trashed. The wheel was rusted out. Luckily I had this one laying around. Seemed to hold air. A little rough, but for hay rake. Only problem was the center was too small. It was only about, I think it was 3 7/8, 3.5. So I had to take a 4-inch hole saw and hole saw out big enough where it would fit. So it worked, just rode right on the lip of the existing lip, which was I think 3 7/8, and drilled right out. Seems to fit pretty good. So I think we'll be in business. Now I've got 2 working front tires, not quite new, repurposed, and now I just need 2 back ones. and to weld up the hitch for this thing. And I think she'll be ready to rake. These back tires off, and they're pretty rough. Not exactly sure if I'm gonna be able to reuse them or not. They are pretty well rusted. You can see right here the valve holes are completely rusted out, but I want to get these tires off and see what I'm dealing with, if there's any way I can patch this or somehow try to find some used ones, because I cannot find any new ones online. I've looked everywhere. But right now I'm going to get all these bearings out. It's pretty much a 5/8 bore inside here with a bunch of bearings, and the bearings are pretty rough. So I'm going to take these out, and I've got just cut out an old oil can, some gas in there, and gas is a pretty good cleaner. It's just, you gotta be careful when you dispose of it. So I'm gonna get these out, put them in the oil, let them soak, and get these cleaned up. Which what they consist of: a seal, and then a bunch of roller bearing. And you can see they're pretty well gummed up, a bunch of grit and dirt, but they really don't look too awful bad. I'm gonna soak them in some gas, and just kind of let them sit overnight, and I'll take a little wire brush, brass brush or something, and clean them up. They're already looking quite a bit better. So you can see there's a couple of places on there that are pretty bad. But we'll see once we get them cleaned up if we can reuse them. Hopefully they'll be all right, because I don't know where in the world you find these. I can't even find the wheels, so who knows. But looking pretty good. Quite a bit better than they were. So just let them soak a little while and see what happens. Break this tire loose, and to do that I've got some soap and water put in there, and I've got to break this bead, and you can see the step in the tire. You've got to get the whole bead down in the center right here before you can pry up one side and get it off. And they make tools for all this, but I don't do it often enough to really justify buying them. So some big blunt screwdrivers and some pry bars will do the trick. But first you got to get that bead to break. Squirted a bunch of soap and water on there, and hopefully that'll help loosen things up. And I'm going to take this valve core out. It's got a tube in here, and just to make sure it's not still holding any air, which I highly doubt. But just in case, if it is, it'll never come off. Got it off, and the wheel looks pretty daggone rough. I'm gonna clean it up and see if there's any hope, but it looks pretty bad. All right, well, I've been working on these wheels off and on, and I've looked all over the place, and you cannot find the 12-inch with, these are 3 1/4 from bolt to bolt lug pattern. You cannot find them. I've looked and called everywhere, so ended up having to patch these up. And not one of my prettier jobs. These things are so pitted and rusted that just welding them was a fit. I had to cut it down pretty much on the lowest setting on about 40 amps on a 1/16 rod, and it would still come through in places. So it was a bear. But what I'm gonna do, I've got some epoxy that is actually for my boat project, but I'm gonna use a little bit of this, and I'm gonna coat just in case there's any pinholes in here, because once I got all the rust scale and everything off, some more pinholes showed up, and I patched a couple of them. You can see where I welded and patched a couple of the pinholes, but I'm gonna give it a good coat on the inside all the way around. I wish I wouldn't have painted it. I got a little paint happy yesterday, but I'm gonna take that epoxy and just cover the inside and hope that that will, you know, give a little bit of strength and integrity to it, but also keep the air in. So, epoxy, it's 2 parts resin, 1 part hardener, and what I'm going to do, it's real thin, so I've got silica thickener that I'm going to use to thicken this up a little bit. I'm just going to give it a good little stir, and then I'm going to add a little bit of silica, make sure it's kind of mixed up a little bit, and then I'm going to start thickening it. Probably a 1/2 cup of silica to this. I mixed up a lot more than I really intended to. I been a while since I mixed it up and I forgot. I thought it was 1-to-1, but it's 2-to-1. So I've got quite a bit and had to use quite a bit of silica to get it thickened up here. So it's about the consistency I want. I don't want it to run all over everywhere. So we're gonna go ahead and keep mixing it a little bit, get the lumps out. I'm gonna brush it on. So I'm gonna get a nice coating on here. I've never tried this, but I was laying in bed last night thinking of a way to use something that I had to make sure these wheels were sealed. And I thought I'd give this a try. So I'm gonna give it a try and I'll put a post up or something and let you know how it goes. So this is not something I've tried before, but I thought it sounded like a really good idea to me. So I'm just gonna get them all coated up. The other reason I wanted to go with the epoxy is these things are really pitted, and epoxy will just kind of flow and kind of fill in some of these voids that all the scale and the rust has created to give it a little bit better seal. So that was, at least was my thinking and hopes for this. Now we'll see how it all turns out, but I think it'll work good. I probably should have done this before I painted it, so it would be going straight to metal, which I really wish I would have, but we'll see how it works. All right, well, it's looking pretty good. So where I patched it, this is the first coat. It's looking really good. So what I'm doing is starting to kick a little bit, starting to get a little thicker. So this one I've got one coat on. I'll set it over here in the sun, and that loosens it back up a little bit. So I'm gonna bring it back over here to the shade and just go over it one more time and make sure everything looks good. But I'm pretty happy with the way it's turning out. All right, so as you can tell, I completely broke off the hitch for the rake when I was pulling it out of the woods and the weeds. And I'm gonna bust it apart, straighten the brackets back out, weld her all back together. I'm gonna strengthen that up in the center there a little bit too. I already had a hard time getting the bend out on the anvil, which I'm obviously going to beat that up, but I was going to still use that and keep it straight. All the times putting it on the ground and giving a whack, it'll give in the middle of the ground, and got it right out. Done. A little bit better on the side, the top. Yeah, not so good. Pretty hard one-handed, at least for me. For one hand, you can cut my amperage up just a little bit. Piece in here. It's not quite as thick as I would like, but next step up is that, and that's just going to be a little too much. So this will have enough strength, I believe. All right, now we just need a a hole for a bolt to go through. All right, we got ourselves a hitch. All right, now I got to drill my hole in my wheels for my valve stems. So it's technically supposed to be a 4.53, which is going to equivalent to just over 7/16. All right, now we just got to get this thing bolted back on and we'll be ready to go. And the bolts go kind of interesting. They've got washers or bushings on them, so they got to go in like so. All right, we got our hitch attached. Now we just got to go get our wheels put on for the back tires. So I've had my bearings out of the rear wheels for the Rake soaking some gas for a couple of days, and I'm just gonna kind of get them rinsed off for the most part and put them in some cleaner and kind of get these things getting cleaned up. And then once I get them cleaned up, I'm gonna let them dry just a little bit, and then I'm gonna grease them up really well. So I'm gonna roll pretty much pack grease in all the bearings and get them ready to roll. For the spindles that go inside of the hub for the back tires, and they've got a pretty good lip on them. I know I'm gonna make somebody cringe, but I'm gonna take a file, because they're pretty hard, and just real lightly kind of just knock that edge off. But once I do that, I am then gonna take some 400 and smooth it out. So just gonna knock those burrs off because the bearings ride right in here, and they had pretty bad. This one's not quite as bad as the other one I just did. Just got a really pretty pronounced lip there. I'm gonna get that off of there. All right, we got that knocked down. It's about as good as new. All right, we just got the tires put on. I'm gonna pack these bearings full of grease and rubbing them around and getting a really good coating in there all the way around. And I'm just gonna put them all back together. Got these back wheels back on, and I'm gonna tighten them up. I'm gonna tighten it down to where you can feel it's got a little tension on it. And then I'm gonna back it off about a quarter turn. That way it'll spin free and still tight. Over one more time, and I decided that these chains probably should go. If they were to break, the wheel of the Rakes would drop down on the, I don't know what these are called, the rungs. I'm new to all this, so I don't know all the terminology. But I'm gonna go ahead, I've got some chain that size, I'm gonna go ahead and replace these. So I've got this end just held up with a jack, let tension off the tensioner, and I'm gonna go cut some pieces of chain to fit. My chain's here, and as you can tell, these were beaten out a little bit rounder so they'd fit over the bars, so I'm gonna have to do that. But this one was 2 lengths shorter, so I'm gonna actually just make it 1 length because it was adjusted up and the 2 lengths were just hanging there. So I'm gonna cut it 1 length because that side was up just a little bit higher. All right, so to bow these out, there's really not a lot to it. You hold it on your pair of vice grips, give it a good whack. Already done this side, and you can tell the width difference. And that does degrade the chain just a little bit, but otherwise it's not gonna fit over the eye hooks that it hooks to. We got our new chains in place, and I tried to be careful not to get them twisted so they'll go through the rollers pretty well. This one right here, it's a touch off, touch tweaked, but it seems to be doing all right. We got her hooked up, and got her hooked up to the tractor. We're gonna take her for a little spin and see how she turns. So hopefully everything holds together. And this tire did leak down. I'm gonna fill air in that real quick. But I think I said this before, that out disengages it, in engages it. So right now I'm gonna disengage it, get a little air in that tire, take her for a spin. I don't have any hay cut yet, still growing a little bit, but hopefully I'll cut some soon. I really just want to see if this thing's worth messing with, if it'll work more than anything really. Here we go. All right, well, I'm just gonna run her down through here towards the pond where it's already been mowed. Go ahead and drop it down. I don't want to drop it all the way down because I'm not really raking hay. Just get it kind of centered. it does work. Awesome. This old thing, I don't have any idea how old this thing is. I need to look that up actually. But it still spins. And I didn't have it obviously down like I was gonna rake. But some of the tines were scraping and didn't break any yet. So, but man, I'm excited. This is gonna be fun, a new little experience. So I'm gonna go ahead and raise it back up and go ahead and park it. And now I'm just gonna have to break out the sickle mower and let the grass get just a little bit higher. Break out the sickle mower, mow some hay. So this was pretty fun for me. I like working on this old stuff, getting old things working again. So I'm obviously, I'll probably mow once and just see how the teeth hold up, and rake it once. All the teeth pretty much break off. I'm not gonna go through the pain of replacing all of the grease fittings that I need to replace. But if it does well, we're gonna replace all the fittings and get her going like new. So I hope somebody liked this, and appreciate everybody watching, and hope you subscribe.